morning and welcome, friends, to the Washington, D.C. Lodge. Today's talk is on occult origins of the United States, and we all know that the Theosophical movement of the 19th century continues to be with us very strongly. United Lodge of Theosophists is disseminating this philosophy all over the world. We're everywhere and in every country, and the forces behind scenes are always with us if our intention is honesty and integrity, and we are here only to disseminate the truth that were given to the world in the 19th century through the writings of the agent, HPB, her staunch friend and colleague, Mr. Judge, and of course the regenerator of the movement, RC. We are not a branch of the TS. United Lodge of Theosophists are a conglomeration of students of like-mindedness, and they all take an oath to disseminate the true teachings, true philosophy of Theosophy. The founding of this nation, this great republic, was definitely influenced by the Master's Lodge. The movement is always in the world, but sometimes it is not known to us. But the Lodge, in the occult sense, on the invisible planes, always works to uplift humanity. So when we look at the back of the dollar note, we can see the caption very clearly indicating how they were involved. And when we read about Thomas Paine's life, whom the Lodge found as a receptive soul in England and sent to the United States to help with the formation of this great republic, we see him saying that he saw a great vista opening to the world through the United States. And his aim from that moment on, landing here in the United States, was to enable the fighting souls at that time to see that they needed to become independent of England, so that this vista opening to the world can actually be brought into functioning essence. So the United States then was definitely founded by those forces behind scenes, as well as Washington, Paine, and all the others that assisted them. Its preservation belongs to Abraham Lincoln, and today all the generations that are here and will come after this century will either promote its welfare or work against it. And when we look around, we see that there's a tremendous division in our nation, and it needs to be healed and made whole again. The United Lodge of Theosophists are independent in their devotion to the cause of Theosophy, without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the Theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy, and the exemplification in practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among Theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as Theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization, and it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. Today's reading comes from the voice of the silence. Kill out desire, but if thou killest it, take heed lest from the dead it should again arise. Kill love of life, but if thou slayest tanha, let this not be for thirst of life eternal, but to replace the fleeting with the everlasting. Desire nothing, chafe not at karma, nor at nature's changeless laws, but struggle only with the personal, the transitory, the evanescent, and the perishable. Help nature and work on with her, and nature will regard thee as one of her creatures and make obeisance, and she will open wide before thee the portals of her secret chambers, lay bare before thy gaze the treasures hidden in the very depths of her pure virgin bosom. Unsullied by the hand of mother, she shows her treasures only to the eye of spirit, the eye which never closes, the eye for which there is no veil in all her kingdoms. Then will she show thee the means and way, the first gate and the second, the third up to the very seventh, and then the goal, beyond which lie, bathed in the sunlight of the Spirit, glories untold, unseen by any save the eye of soul. There is but one road to the path. At its very end alone, the voice of the silence can be heard. The ladder by which the candidate ascends is formed of rungs of suffering and pain. These can be silenced only by the voice of virtue. Woe then to thee, disciple, if there is one single vice thou hast not left behind, for then the ladder will give way and overthrow thee. Its foot rests in the deep mire of thy sins and failings, and ere thou canst attempt to cross this wide abyss of matter, thou hast to lave thy feet in waters of renunciation. Beware lest thou should set a foot, still soiled, upon the ladder's lowest rung. Woe unto him who dares pollute one rung with miry feet. The foul and viscous mud will dry, become tenacious, then glue his feet unto the spot, and like a bird caught in the wily fowler's lime, he will be stayed from further progress. His vices will take shape and drag him down. His sins will raise their voices like as the jackals laugh and sob after the sun goes down. His thought become an army and bear him off a captive slave. Kill thy desires, Lanu, make thy vices impotent, ere the first step is taken on the soul journey. And now, today's talk. Occult origins of the United States.
Thank you, friends. Yesterday, the United States of America celebrated its official birth, which was July 4, 1776. But few recognize the depth, as the first student indicated, of the reasoning for the birth of this nation. This talk is along the lines of writings left to us by HPB and WQJ, and further presented about Thomas Paine in the Great Theosophists Series. The government of the United States was established at a time of extreme dogmatism. Many came to America for religious freedom, while holding firm to their own particular beliefs. So we might assume that the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States would include much about religion. But this is not the case. In searching the Declaration, we find a reference to nature and nature's God. The natural rights of man are specified, such as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The Declaration appeals to their native justice and magnanimity in addressing British brethren. All references to religion and Christianity or God's commands are left out. Article 6 of the Constitution says, "No religious test as a qualification for office shall ever be required." And the First Amendment prohibits an establishment of religion or restraint of its free exercise. Mr. Judge noted that in 1774, the Adepts influenced Thomas Paine, through the help of Benjamin Franklin, to come to America. Tom Paine became the main instigator of the separation of the colonies from the British Crown. At the suggestion of Washington, Franklin, Jefferson, and other Freemasons, Paine wrote Common Sense. First published on December 1, 1776, Paine indicated the focus should be on the importance of the content and not the name of the author, so it was published anonymously. Common Sense embraced secularism and belief in human perfectibility in quotes such as, quote, "We have it in our power to begin the world over again. O ye that love mankind, ye that dare oppose not only tyranny, but the tyrant, stand forth." End quote. George Washington later wrote to Paine, quote, "I shall be exceedingly happy to see you. Your presence may remind Congress of your past services to this country, and if it is in my power to impress them, command my best exertions with freedom, as they will be rendered cheerfully by one who entertains a lively sense of the importance of your works." Close quote. And again, in a letter to Madison, Washington said, "Can nothing be done in our assembly for poor Paine? Must the merits and services of common sense continue to glide down the stream of time unrewarded by this country?" His writings certainly have had a powerful effect upon the public mind. Ought they not then to meet an adequate return? In the age of reason, Paine said, I saw, or at least I thought I saw, a vast scene opening itself to the world in the affairs of America, and it appeared to me that unless the Americans changed the plan they were then pursuing and declared themselves independent, they would not only involve themselves in a multiplicity of new difficulties, but shut out the prospect that was then offering itself to mankind through their means. Close quote. Further on, he says, quote, there are two distinct classes of thoughts, those produced by reflection and those that bolt into the mind of their own accord. I have always made it a rule to treat these voluntary visitors with civility, and it is from them I have acquired all the knowledge that I have. Mr. Judge added that these voluntary visitors were injected into Mr. Paine's brain by the Adepts. Seeing that a new order of ages was about to commence and that there was a new chance for freedom in the brotherhood of man, the Adepts laid before the eye of Thomas Paine, who they knew could be trusted to stand almost alone with a lamp of trust in his hand amidst others who in times that tried men's souls quaked with fear. Close quote. The result was a Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States. As the first speaker indicated, the design of the reverse side of the Great Seal of the United States is a pyramid whose capstone is removed with the blazing eye in a triangle over it, dazzling the sight. Above it are the words, "The heavens approve." It is English translation down here. While underneath appears the startling sentence, "A new order of the ages." The design of the seal symbolizes the building and firm founding of a new order of ages. It puts into form the idea which by means of a voluntary visitor was presented to the mind of Thomas Paine of a vast scene opening itself, the beginning in America of a new order of ages. Mr. Judge went on to note that the Theosophical Adepts hovered over Washington, Jefferson, and all the other brave Freemasons who dared to found a free government in the West, which could be pure from the dross of dogmatism. The Adepts cleared their minds, inspired their pens, and left upon the great seal of this mighty nation the memorial of their presence. In his Rights of Man, Part 2, Chapter 2, Mr. Paine said, quote, "No beginning could be made in Asia, Africa, or Europe to reform the political condition of man. She, meaning America, made a stand not for herself alone, but for the world, and looked beyond the advantage she could receive." Mr. Paine also said in Chapter 4 that the case and circumstances of America present themselves as in the beginning of a world, there is a morning of reason rising upon man in the subject of government that has not appeared before. Mr. Paine's first publication in this country was dated March 8, 1775. It addressed African slavery in America. He stated that some desperate wretches should be willing to steal and enslave men by violence and murder for gain is rather lamentable and strange. But that many civilized, nay Christianized people should approve and be concerned in this savage practice is surprising, and still persist, though it has been so often proved contrary to the light of nature, to every principle of justice and humanity, and even good policy, by a succession of eminent men, and several late publications. Just a few weeks later, on April 14, 1775, the first anti-slavery society in America was formed in Philadelphia. Tom Paine was a founding member, and Washington's army was more integrated than any American force up until the Vietnam War. Some quotes of others about Mr. Paine. John Adams. History is to ascribe the American Revolution to Thomas Paine. That was quoted in 1776. Number 2. Without the pen of Paine, the sword of Washington would have been wielded in vain. Number 3. I know not whether any man in the world has had more influence on his inhabitants or affairs for the last 30 years than Tom Paine. That was quoted from 29 October 1805. And now we have Napoleon Bonaparte. A statue of gold ought to be erected to you, Paine, in every city of the universe. I assure you I always sleep with the rights of man under my pillow. I desire you to honor me with your correspondence and advice. Close quote. From Abraham Lincoln. I never tire of reading Tom Paine. From Thomas Alva Edison. I consider Paine our greatest political thinker, as we have not advanced, and perhaps never shall advance, beyond the Declaration and Constitution. So Paine has had no successors who extended his principles. The first drafts of the Declaration of Independence were penned by Jefferson, but the words had already been used by or were strongly influenced by Paine. Paine, enlisted as a private, was made aide-de-camp to General Greene and took part in various battles. December 1776, the first series of Paine's letters on the crisis. Started with, "These are the times that try men's souls." On Christmas Eve, Washington had it read to the troops at Valley Forge. From then on, the war was won. The sword but followed out the furrows traced by Paine as the war went on. At each point where all seemed engulfed, another of the crisis pamphlets would appear. At each emptied moment, Paine filled once more the cup of courage. Just as Grace Paine gave grace to all and spelled the final triumph out of the broken letters of defeat. The Pennsylvania legislature later made Paine its clerk. Paine was made secretary of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Continental Congress. In 1781, he was sent to France for a loan. He was successful. He returned and organized the Bank of North America to raise money to feed and clothe the army. He lived in France for most of the 1790s and in 1791 and 1792, Thomas Paine published Parts 1 and 2 of The Rights of Man, a defense of the French Revolution. 1792 in England, he was indicted by the British as an outlaw. but left before he got arrested. He was elected to the French Assembly even though he spoke no French. He voted against the death for the king. He was in prison for a year until James Monroe got him released in 1794. He published The Age of Reason in France in 1802. President Jefferson offered passage on the ship Maryland so he would be safe from the British, who were intent on arresting the chief instigator of the American Rebellion. Thomas Paine stayed at Monticello upon his return. The state of New York later gave him New Rochelle Forum. On June 8, 1809, at age 72, Thomas Paine was dead. Paine's bones were later exhumed to be sent to the place of his birth, but have now disappeared. Had Paine's ardent world patriotism prevailed over the national patriotism of Washington, it was written that we would have been spared the War of 1812 and the Great War of 1914. Thomas Paine's profession of faith. The world is my country, to do good is my religion. His faith was centered on the belief of a first cause eternally existing and of a universe governed by law. Paine showed from history that the age of ignorance commenced with the Christian system. The expression of such thoughts caused Paine to be called an infidel. Christian writers have claimed that Paine died a drunkard and that on his deathbed he confessed his error in attacking religious dogma. Such lies have long since disappeared, but are still pernicious among us. The absence of the Christian God from the Declaration of Independence and from the Constitution of the United States is due to the influence of Thomas Paine. Religious freedom throughout this broad land where sects thrive but liberty of conscience still prevails is due to Thomas Paine. From an American experiment by Mr. Judge, we find that the Theosophical Society was formed with the object of forming a nucleus of universal brotherhood, a repetition on the purely moral side of the Declaration. The theosophical experiment of the present century is a product of the soil of America. In her 5 messages to the American Theosophists, HPV said she was proud to be a citizen of the United States and that our karma as a nation had brought Theosophy home to us. In the 4th message, written just before her death, she gave us the method by which this country might be saved. Be Theosophists, work for Theosophy. Theosophy first and Theosophy last. For its practical realization alone can save the Western world from that selfish and unbrotherly feeling that now divides race from race, one nation from other, and from that hatred of class and social considerations that are the curse and disgrace of so-called Christian people. Theosophy alone can save it from sinking entirely into the mere luxurious materialism in which it will decay and putrefy as civilizations have done before. In your hands, brothers, is placed in trust the welfare of the coming century, and great as is the trust, so great also is the responsibility. And that trust and that responsibility continues to be in our hands, whether or not we have ever heard of the word Theosophy. Hope everyone had a great July 4th yesterday. Thank you for your attention.